Hey, greetings. Coming to you from the mobile studios, MGMWERX in Montgomery, Alabama. My name's Eric Gerritson, and this is Werx on the Web. Thanks for joining us for our inaugural kickoff of Werx on the Web, and I'm really glad that you're here. My guest over the next half hour is someone I consider a friend. I've known Alex for now almost a year. We've never met face to face. In fact, today is the first time I've ever seen his face, and it looks good too. And he's streaming from his basement apartment in New York City. Alex is living in the basement. Are you living with your mom? People want to know.
Well, I'd like to think I've moved on as a 30-something-year-old living in a basement. So I haven't moved up from the basement, but I am living alone without my family. So that is a positive, but doing well. Thank you.
Oh, that's good. You know, because that's really the first thing I'd want to know. Are you living with your mom in the basement? Okay.
No, I am not.
Okay, so Alex is here to talk about some technologies and is here to talk about his company called SimpleSense. And as we talk about SimpleSense, I'm going to ask Alex a series of questions that I hope will get you a little bit interested in finding out more about what SimpleSense is and what they can do not only for the DoD, for the Air Force, the Army, but what perhaps they can do for you. Perhaps you live in a city surrounding a DoD installation. This may be a conversation that would be beneficial for you. Hey, Alex, how did you get started in SimpleSense?
So we really got started with the help of SoftWorks. A couple of our advisors had recommended that we look into several different Department of Defense problem sets, but there is definitely a stereotype within the startup community that working with the Department of Defense is extremely difficult. It's hard to meet stakeholders, get directly to a problem, and then get funding to solve that problem. And what changed our mind about working with the DoD was we were able to get accepted into this SoftWorks program, get awarded a $50,000 contract, and then get paid within a month, which is amazingly fast in the B2B startup space. And so after that experience, we looked into more problems within government and found that this communication problem was really core to a lot of the different public safety agencies we spoke to. Went to a couple other conferences and found that for the most part, the industry is still using radio or fancy walkie-talkies for most of their communication. Right. Other industries have advanced to better software packages, and we were just very curious why public safety hadn't made that leap. And so at those conferences, I made a bunch of connections, and they helped get me down the path of really understanding the public safety communication ecosystem. And with their guidance, we went on our own journey, interviewed 125 different first responders from Chicago to San Francisco over a 2-year period, and found that the problem really existed throughout the country. No one was really using what we thought were appropriate sets of tools. It was still very 1980s technology, and so we saw an opportunity to help.
So I don't know that we've really talked about problems you help solve. For example, I was in the Air Force for 20 years, and much of my career I was a security policeman, or as they call it now, a security forces person. We ran into problems oftentimes on different installations where we would have to deal with the community law enforcement, community fire, community EMS, along with dealing with the Air Force fire, Air Force security forces nets, and it would often cause confusion. So is SimpleSense help, is it meant to bring all those together into one package and so that it's more integrated?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the problems there, sure. Just to give a little bit more context. So each one of those functional areas procures software in a silo. Through a different procurement method. There have been several methods within the Department of Defense to consolidate that, but for the most part, the security forces are buying and testing and deploying their own thing, fire's deploying their own thing, installation commands doing their own thing. And it's very difficult to get all of those groups to talk to each other because they have different compliance requirements. And so for the most part, people just don't bother taking that extra step of building an interface to other systems. They rely on humans to integrate all the data instead. And the result of that is you have an operator at an installation like Wright-Patterson that has to enter data into 5 different systems every time there's a 911 call. And there's a cost of about 6 minutes, as well as increased cognitive load just due to pure data entry of the same data into all of these different systems. And so within the software development world, there's a concept called DRY, which is don't repeat yourself,
right.
Which we think applies very well to this particular problem set, where the data should be entered into a single incident source of truth, and that could be many different systems aggregated and shared in real time with other platforms. So you can elevate a dispatcher's job away from data entry into incident management.
So I really like what Chief Jacob King from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base had to say. And the people who are watching can see it's amazing. We could put bombs on target, but we can't dispatch a fire truck. We can't dispatch a security policeman to an incident without having to go through perhaps 5, 6, 7 different jurisdictions. I can remember one specific incident when I was stationed at the Air Force Academy. There was sadly a double homicide, and jurisdiction for investigating those homicides fell on the county sheriff, not the security forces who were there. Just that 2 sharing jurisdictions with one other, with what the city and the county caused confusion. And so basically you're saying that with SimpleSense, it would actually help clarify things and speed up the interoperability of a county sheriff, a city police department, the security forces, the fire department, all coming together and helping to solve an issue quicker. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yeah. So we identified an opportunity during discovery to better interconnect local agency communication systems with Air Force command and control platforms. So if we look at, for example, Hanscom Air Force Base, there are 5 different 911 jurisdictions that overlap the base. So depending on where you're actually landing or what part of the process you are in landing, you're in a different 911 call jurisdiction. And it also depends on RF frequencies, and it really creates chaos because none of the 911 centers coordinate their operations or personnel. There's turnover, and so that adds to delay and confusion. So one of the solutions that we recommended was to integrate into the computer-aided dispatch systems within each of these 911 jurisdictions and ingest emails and convert them to an interface that could be read by command and control platforms immediately. So as soon as that dispatch goes out, an Air Force fire or police operator immediately sees the nature of the incident, the units dispatched, the time, and the geolocation, and they're able to respond immediately. And early testing shows that there's an opportunity for about 6 minutes of response time reduction with that information. And we're working with Draper Labs human cognition team to understand the cognitive load reduction as well, because when you make things easier for operators, you're able to handle more complex or different tasks.
So when we're talking about today's environment, we have the day-to-day operations. Then you have what we're going through right now in America with the coronavirus. But then you also have the threat of terrorism all the time hanging over our heads. Are you saying that with, or if there had been a SimpleSense kind of interoperability system in place in New York City, that it could have actually helped perhaps save time, save lives?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So within these more complex jurisdictions like Boston or New York, there's a lot of different agencies involved, and they don't necessarily communicate with each other during large natural disasters like coronavirus. And so the National Guard and installation commanders spend a lot of time coordinating and issuing directives to these different agencies. And a tool that could help them was being able to plot their emergency unit dispatches, their fire, EMS, police on a shared data bridge that integrates into all of these different common operating pictures. So all of the agencies know in real time where resources are allocated. And with that information, they're able to make faster, better, more effective decisions.
Sure. You know, Alex, I heard a story the other day from a couple Harvard professors that were talking about the way that you look at things, and they shared the story of the New York City Police Department. When their helicopters were flying over the Twin Towers, they were able to see that the buildings were getting ready to collapse. The girders were getting ready to fail, and they actually were able to order their police officers out of the buildings. Where at the same time, the fire department didn't have that information. And so as they told the story, I believe it was only 27 New York City police officers died when the towers collapsed compared to over 300 firemen. Had they had this shared interoperability that you're talking about with SimpleSense, perhaps we could have saved a whole lot more first responders.
Yeah, I think what you're touching on is incidents don't follow agency lines or budgets. Incidents are problems that need to be reacted to by a larger stakeholder community. Right. And the challenge is that we procure these systems in silos first before considering the interoperability of that system. And that creates communication problems like the one you described. Fortunately, digital radio has helped solve some of the problem, and that now we're dealing with TCP/IP systems. We can send data messages, and so there are some solutions out there for solving the interoperability problems. The challenge really is still understanding the conceptual operations and how fire and police would effectively share information and building that culture within those communities. It's just very different than how they've operated until now.
Right. So a friend of mine who actually is the commander of the civil support team here in Alabama, one of his vehicles does, I believe, what you're talking about, what SimpleSense does, but he has to have a vehicle with all the different radio equipment on it in order for them to be able to share data at a critical incident, where in fact you, with a software package, can do the same thing, most likely cheaper, and it can be actually scaled out easier. Is that correct? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I would just be careful that we're probably not doing all the things that they're doing, because there are some things that SimpleSense is not an appropriate solution for. Like if you do need real-time tactical communications through a radio link, we're probably not your best bet. But
okay.
What startups are good at is really understanding, what is 80% of the problem and what can you solve with the least amount of work. And we've identified through our testing and early discovery that those first 6 minutes are so critical to an incident for determining the outcome of the incident and determining if it's a positive or negative result or outcome. And so we've really focused our tool on just those 6 minutes in a way that most other solutions have not. They're trying to be a general solution for a whole bunch of different use cases, which is great. You still need those. But the operators within these Air Force installations really need different specialized tools for some of the problems that they're facing.
Gotcha.
And it's really hard to develop those tools through the requirements process unless you involve the user in discussions every day, or every time you make a change.
So if you could right now, if you can stand up or stand outside the Pentagon and say, I want to talk to so-and-so agency, I want to talk to so-and-so, office, who would be the agencies or the offices that you would want to talk to today about your solutions?
The number one would be Homeland Security. I think there's a big opportunity for them to add more interoperability to their portfolio, and I think it aligns with their mission area really well. They've done a great job with building first responder tools like protective equipment, weapons, and things like that. However, I think there's an opportunity for them to move beyond just standard radio interoperability and define for broader sets of the community different ways that interoperability could be digitized and leveraged in operations.
So how about within the Air Force? Who would you want to be in front of talking to right now? You had mentioned some to me in the past. Yeah,
so in the Air Force, we're spending a lot of time with the Kessel Run. Sorry, let me start another take. So In the Air Force, we've spent a lot of time working with Kessel Run to identify our key stakeholders, and we believe them to be A4C, the civil engineers, the Air Force Installation Mission Support Center, the Air Force Civil Engineering Center, as well as several types of installation customers. And so it's really hard to say there's just one customer. It's really, there's a community. So we've spent a lot of time trying to find the members of that community that are really interested in solving this problem, and involving them with our day-to-day development. And so it's a hard question for me to answer because it's not so much the unit within the Air Force, it's the personalities and the people that really care.
Wow. I know it's a challenge. It's got to be, especially for a startup. And that is the beauty of the Werx phenomenon, whether it be SoftWorks, whether it be MGMWERX, whether it be WERX, or whatever it may be. This Werx phenomenon really helps to bring the small business like yourself and connect them. I know we're not perfect all the time, but we're helping you make those connections, and I hope it's going well for you. We'll talk more about that here in a second. But the other part of that is the SBIR program, helping to fund these kind of startups, these entrepreneurial things. There's the SBIR program, which really is 11 federal agencies plus the ones with under the DoD, the Air Force, the Army, the Navy. The SBIR program. Are you using SBIR dollars, or have you gotten some SBIR dollars from the Air Force?
Yeah, so we've won 2 phase 1s with the Air Force as well as a phase 2 SBIR contract. And the SBIR program has changed a lot since we've started. And in that evolution, it's gotten a lot more friendly to startups. We were actually part of a beta acquisition cohort called the Banshee program that was able to approve a SBIR phase 2 in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Both these SBIRs usually take longer. So we feel very fortunate to be connected to the right set of stakeholders within the Air Force, and are excited to see where that program will evolve. But yeah, SBIRs have been really a core part of building out our product. Before any engagement with the Air Force, we were really focused on commercial customers and integrating private security teams, but the Air Force gave us an opportunity to understand an Air Force specific need, and then build technology to solve that problem. With the SBIR program, we would have had to spend more time solving commercial problems, which would not have been great for the operators that we're talking to today. There are some questions in terms of navigating the SBIR program outside of these Air Force programs like AFWERX and some of the pitch days, because it's a little bit unclear who is proposing these SBIR topics or how to get involved. It's still a little bit disconnected. MGMWERX and the other Werx programs have done a great job of bringing in the stakeholders directly, so you're able to talk to a person before you apply to a topic and get to understand their needs a little bit better. And there's still a little bit of a question of what a phase 3 transition process would look like for most startups. I mean, I don't think it's a big secret that the Air Force really identified phase 3 transitions as a major need area for the SBIR program. And they're working through how to do that from a contractual acquisition standpoint, as well as a requirements standpoint. So not only how do you award the phase 3, but then how do you get that company under the umbrella of a program of record?
So without going into too much detail, what is the difference between a phase 2 and a phase 3 when you're talking about the Small Business Innovative Research Program?
That's a good question. So a phase 2 award is a smaller award in Air Force terms for small business, big award for a company to build out their technology and test it and validate it with Air Force stakeholders to prove that that technology meets an Air Force need. And the awards are somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million.
Wow.
And if you are able to validate your technology within the SBIR program, then the next natural step is a phase 3, which is not an award of money. What it is it's a contracting vehicle that a program office or installation can use to procure your technology. So you're able to go to the security forces or go to the fire department and say, hey, I've been funded to develop this technology, and now I have the contracting vehicle to work with you. So you should probably work with us to solve this particular problem.
Right. So one of the great things I really like about the SIBR program, which is such a benefit for an entrepreneur like yourself or anybody doing software development or idea development, whatever it may be, is that the Air Force, the military, the DoD, in the SIBR program, they don't want your property. They do not want your intellectual property. They don't want you to build something for them and then give it to them and then you walk away. They want to help you develop your product out and then contract you to run that product or sell that product back to them. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, they're paying you to build a product that you will be able to sell to the Department of Defense.
What a crazy idea. But it's pretty exciting because that opens up the door to all kinds of entrepreneurs. No longer do they have to be afraid that they're going to have to sell away their soul. They're something they've been working on for so long. Now they can sell their idea back to the Air Force who helped develop it, and they can keep all their intellectual property to themselves. Well, that's
the other piece that I think is also extremely important is the credibility that startups gain by working with the government. The government does a great job of validating technology, and being able to take that stamp of approval back to the private sector is really important for driving enterprise sales and validating a dual use case.
Wow, that's a great deal. So Alex, we're running out of time, but I have a couple more questions for you. So what would be your brief insights that you would have for another entrepreneur or another business that's considering working with the Air Force or the DoD in a SIBR program? What would you tell them?
There's a network of people that are experienced with going through the SIBR program, and by engaging with groups like SoftWorks, MGMWERX, Mass Challenge, you can really accelerate your understanding of the ecosystem and get engaged within about a week or two, where you try to figure everything out by yourself all alone. It can take months. So I strongly encourage entrepreneurs to seek out those ecosystems of other entrepreneurs solving problems within the Department of Defense, because we're all eager to help out. It's usually non-competitive and can really help out your business.
Well, Alex, this has been fascinating. And every time I talk to somebody like yourself who has been working in the SBIR program, I have some corporate knowledge on it, but I don't have the experience that you do. So I thank you so much for helping me and the listeners and the viewers have a little bit more experience in the SBIR program. Is there anything else you want to end with when we're talking about SimpleSense and what you can do? What would be your final pitch to everybody who's watching about SimpleSense?
I mean, if you want to save 15,000 lives a year, you should support our mission, because that's what the numbers show.
That's amazing, Alex. And I just thank you so much for spending time with us today, spending time on our initial Werx on the web. So I'm really glad that you got to be the first guy. I hope it hasn't been too painful for you, but I've really enjoyed myself. And so on behalf of my producer, Becky, the director, Joshua at MGMWERX, and on behalf of myself, I really appreciate you spending time with us today at Werx on the web. And for all of you who want to connect with Alex, you can do that by going to www.simplesense.io, and you can go ahead and go to his website and then connect with him that way.
But my email is Alex, so it's ALEX @simplesense.io.
Perfect. Well, again, Alex, thank you very much for your time today. This has been Werx on the Web with MGMWERX. I'm your host, Eric Gerritson. Thank you for spending time with us today. Check back, because we're looking at having a time where we could have Alex live again, where you can ask him anything and he can answer your questions. Thank you very much for spending time with us today. Have a great day.
Thank you.